Attention, everybody. The views and opinions expressed on this show are not necessarily those of Acts Ministry, Acts Media Group, and/or their affiliate subordinate ministries and/or nonprofits. Welcome to the first episode of Just the Facts: Trump versus Biden, with your host, Jason Cobb.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the show. Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. Just the facts. Is that what it says?
Yep, just the facts.
All right. Well, this is it's been a difficult thing for me to put together because, first of all, I have biases, and I'm sure that you all do. So, it's very difficult to. And I also struggled with what really are the facts. I mean, in a representative government, we all need to be represented, and we all have different needs, different desires, and different issues that we have to tackle with every day. So it's difficult.
YouTube's working now.
So it's difficult to come up with the facts as they are relevant to each individual in our country, And so I tried to look at it from that perspective, and it's led me on quite a journey, but then also still trying to stay to the facts,
I'm going to zoom out real quick and just let everybody know who they hear talking in the background. I'm producing this show, and Jay is coming up with it. I will not be weighing in on any opinions in any way, shape, or form because this is a non-bias show, and it's going to be educational for you. And, Jay is really good at looking at both sides of the coin, so to speak.
I think they're important.
Yes.
So I look at them, but does not set my own biases aside.
Right. It's hard to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom back in on you. I just wanted to say hi to everybody and let you know who you hear talking from time to time in the back. So
yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, I saw something interesting. Now, keep in mind as I go through this, I'm going to try to go through who Joe Biden is, his history, as we understand it, with the best source for the information that I can find. Also through Donald Trump's history as a person and who he is, and through the best source for information that I can find. Difficult to find sources that give you facts without bias. So keep that in mind, and I think we all feel the same way about when we search for the facts. We tend to find more bias than we find facts, and biases are represented as facts. So keep that in mind. Also, when I think about Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, just the facts, you have to also consider that as presidential candidates, they have vice presidents for a reason. It's not as a helper or anything like that. It's for somebody to take the position of the presidency should anything happen that would incapacitate the current standing president, the acting president. So we have a vice president who would take the place of the acting president, whoever is elected. So, for instance, if something happened to Donald Trump, knowing now that he has COVID-19, then, of course, Vice President Pence would be the president, right? So we also have to look at them and who they are. Now, this is quite a lot of information, difficult to fit it into a half hour. But I wanted to start this by giving you some guideline and some insight as to how I gathered the facts and the way I see facts myself. And one thing that I also thought was important is to keep in mind that definitions are very important. When it comes to communication and being able to tell you what a fact is, I can use a word, for instance, that you might believe to be defined a different way. So I thought I would start it first of all by telling you you have to have some insight. You can look at terms, you can look at catchphrases, you can look at coin phrases, you can look at all kinds of things that might bring a thought to mind, but for you that thought may be different than someone else. So for instance, when I say politics, a lot of people have a lot of ideas of what that really means. Now, as it's defined, the activities associated with the governance of a country or other area, especially the debate or conflict among individuals or parties having or hoping to achieve power. That's the way it's defined. Okay? So I don't like that definition. When I would refer to politics, there are all kinds of politics. This is governing politics. This is government politics. I have a problem with the idea that this should be power, and I think that maybe is what has brought our state of politics to the point that it is that power would be the key word, is what people are looking for when they get involved in politics or take a position in politics. And I think that it would be better defined, and we would all be better served if the definition, having or hoping to achieve power, would say having responsibility or hoping to achieve power. I think that would be a difference in the definition that I would like to see, or that I would define, put out there, so that we can all maybe understand where I'm coming from. All right. So the facts: Donald Trump is a businessman, has been a businessman most of his life. He did go to school, I believe, went to a boarding school, military type boarding school, which I find to be very interesting and didn't know. Also went to business school. Very interesting. So if I would to think of his perspective in life, it would be in business. How to achieve, succeed, how to acquire wealth, money, position, and power. And when we think of our economics, of course, we want them to be successful. We want to have a successful economy where there's work to be done, there's work to be, jobs to be had, and all of those things. So I think that that from his perspective, it would be to get some things done in the economy area, and banking and all of those things, because he's depended heavily on banking. There's a fact out there. He has claimed some bankruptcies in his career and in his life. I think it's important to note that those restructurings of his wealth and of his assets all came during times, at least the major ones, all came during times of economic downturns, recessions, and such. Times when everybody went through the same thing. So I wouldn't say that those would stand out as some sort of a deceitful or some way for him to leverage the system in his favor, though they weren't necessary until we had economic failures that were nationwide and affected everyone. Okay. Joe Biden, he went to law school. He also was married, had some tragedy in his life. He had several bids for the presidency during his career. He spent most of his career in the Senate. The Senate is responsible for, discussing Donald Trump, his economics is basically the economics of himself and his families has been his focus his life. And there's a lot there, interesting things to talk about. But for Joe Biden, it was the Senate. And the Senate is to represent those without power, those who are those voices of those people and groups and categorizations of people that are not represented. So he has spent his career successfully over 36 years being a senator in one of the smallest. Now, some of my facts also, it's hard to study all these facts, get them in detail, and be, but in general, he's been a senator for Delaware, one of the smallest populous states lowest populous states in the Union. So when it comes to a senator, he is the cream of the crop, in my opinion, because he represented one of the least populous states, which is one of the responsibilities of the Senate, and that is to represent those who have the smallest voice, who need to be represented. He has successfully kept the voice of his people, his people in the Senate and in our government successfully over the years, because he's managed to become reelected. So I would say that's a success on his behalf that he has represented his people well, and in particular, those who don't easily get represented. I think we've seen a lot of voices of people who would not be heard otherwise. We talk about a lot of the conflicts in our nation right now, and small groups rising and standing out in the media lately and being represented heavily in the media. In many ways, those people being represented in the media right now and in the limelight and in the politics on the home front, a lot of those voices aren't necessarily representing our own positions, right? But at the same time, there's somehow also come out of it all the fact that we have all better understood people who are in a position where they are of a minority. That's part of the Senate. They represent minorities, not necessarily racial but minorities of any type. So racial or sexual orientation, and even the point of that being that they represent minorities would mean a minority is a group of people who don't have a voice and can't represent themselves with any power because there's not enough of them. And so that's why a lot of new and unusual things that are kind of hard to swallow are coming up in the media right now, is because, well, quite frankly, they're minorities. We haven't really heard of these positions before because, well, they're minorities. They haven't got the power and the voice to speak up for themselves, and when they do, they're not heard very loudly. And so as senators, both Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are senators, so what we would expect from them as governing from the executive branch is that they, with the power of the president to address the nation, would be addressing the nation on behalf of all types of minorities. Now, for them to have been successful in the Senate, they must do that rather well. So you would find that they probably would stand out as being people who could go into a crowd, and with every person they engage with, they would somehow relate, somehow see their issues and problems and difficulties as very important to them, and that they would go out and champion the causes of the individuals whose eyes they'd looked into, whose stories they had listened to, and they would represent those people very well and fight very aggressively and effectively for those minority groups. Now, I would also note that as we've seen so much conflict rising up right now today in our social environment, is that the minority groups are being represented aggressively. I don't see that as necessarily, there's good and bad. It has its pros and cons. So they are doing that very, very well from the positions that they've been in so far. And I would say that, like the administration before the one that we have now, which would be Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence, you would see that if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris came into the presidency, that they would use the power of the presidency to represent minorities, which you are surely one of when you start to categorize people in more ways than just, their or sexual orientation or whatever. We all become part of a group in their eyes and become important to them. It also can be quite a conflict, as you can imagine. Those types of people would be focusing on our differences, right? So that causes a lot of conflict. It brings a lot of minorities to a prominent position in our society where they are loudest, most aggressive. They've been oppressed in some way, which is true for those minority groups. It's a natural thing for people to be oppressed when they're a minority because their voice is not heard and they are not represented so well or easily. And when they are, the majority of people would stand out as saying, well, that's not my problem, that's your problem, right? So that's the kind of presidency we would expect from them. So I think Donald Trump and Mike Pence, if we have more of the same, we would get more of the same in that they would be fighting for something like a more powerful economy, an economy that thrives and grows every year. As a result of that, we would have both benefits and, there would be pros and cons to that in that we would have an economy where there would be a lot of jobs. They would be plentiful. They would probably pay well enough for you to survive. And now this was interesting to me. I also looked at socioeconomical things. In general, a single income household, whether it be a family or an individual, is usually placed somewhere in lower class or poverty level as far as income goes, which means being able to afford economically certain things. So in order to be successful as a single income, you would have to somehow add an income, which would mean to add a partner that also has an income that would bring you up out of the poverty or low class level. And when you think of economics like Donald Trump would bring, it would mean that it would be required for two-income families in order to rise up out of poverty and out of the lower class. Both pros and cons there, which would mean that school would become a necessity because school is really it provides many things all outside of education. It also provides a place for the children to be when both of the both family members who are earning an income are at work. Well, then the children have a place to go where they can be supervised and taught. So I think that also is where we have a lot of pros and cons in that there's a standard for education. There's a basis for education. Those things prepare you to enter society the way it is now, the economics of society, and the understanding that we have of how people relate to one another. School prepares children for that because the parents aren't really preparing them for it or aren't capable of it because they have to work unless they want to be lower or lower class or poverty level families. Do you understand what I'm saying here? It'd be nice to get feedback because I'm not really understanding. I'm not sure if people are following me. So
people are watching. I believe that people are probably. This is one of the more serious shows that we've ever done, as far as like the outline and the premise of it. And I just let everybody know to feel free to comment in the. In the comment section.
And maybe Matt could represent you when there's a moment. This is a short show, so there's not a lot of time to deal with
just
questions
also remember,
or anything.
This is going to be rebroadcast throughout the week, each show. We're going to record it and broadcast live on Mondays and then broadcast it throughout the week, redo it. So that way more people can see it.
Okay.
We're real excited about this, and we thank everybody for tuning in thus far. Like he said, it's a short show, and you're doing pretty good so far.
So also, I would say with the Trump-Pence presidency, and that's because I'm running out of time and I don't want to go over. So another thing you can expect from a Trump-Pence economy, presidency, which would be basically economic in its nature and its drive, is there are certain things that just have to be when you're talking about massive populations, massive economies, and people being supplied with the opportunity to rise out of poverty and rise out of lower class. You know, you get two people working in families. So, well, that means two people are going to a job to do a job. When it comes to manufacturing, you're manufacturing massive amounts of products that people can use in every household. But it also lends to the lowering of the quality of the products because, you know, in order to keep a business running in that type of economy, things have to be more disposable. So in other words, in order for you to sell two products, one has to go bad, or else people aren't going to need your product after a while. they're all going to have a really good product that's going to work. So there are a lot of aspects to that type of economy, but now that's not necessarily a negative thing when you think of a more disposable and consumer-based economy. It does provide people jobs and incomes. It does provide those who supply those jobs and incomes, people who create and build those businesses, an economy that will support it and keep it thriving and moving forward. So those are all, and those are natural laws, I believe. Laws set in motion by God Himself, or let's say by nature. You can't have an economy where everything you make is supposed to last a lifetime, because if you did, well, then eventually nobody would need anything, because everything they had would last forever, right? So those things have to be, in some sense, consumables. So consumables we would think of as food. Well, it has become a defining term, a term that defines all products that we use now, because we are in a consumer society. So all products that we use are consumables. In other words, this will no longer be any good after a while.
Right.
Right? You won't buy something that's going to last forever.
Things wear down.
Yeah. And then, of course, nothing lasts forever. So those, I don't know, to sum it up, with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, you would find a lot of minority groups being represented there, which you would all be part of a minority group in some way. We can divide us all up into different groups, and we all could definitely use more representation and a stronger voice in government, and our issues and concerns should all be represented better. And could be all represented better. That's the type of thing that you would get with them. However, that would break us down into smaller groups where we would find ourselves coming into more conflicts and finding out that maybe people with the loudest voice don't necessarily represent us. And with with President Donald Trump and Vice President Pence, we'd find ourselves in a consumer-based society that would grow in its productivity, and the quality of products would be lower, but it would also provide jobs and incomes where more important consumable products like food, transportation, and all of those things could be better afforded, and we have a constant cycle of income that could be used to support ourselves and our families. So, and that's basically what I came up with so far, and I thank you all for joining me today for Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. Let's not forget that definitions are important. I'm going to, in the next show, I should be going a little bit more into their platforms, the Democratic and the Republican Party.
Because that was the last
platforms.
question we had, was about what is Biden's platform.
And when I get into that, that's why I brought up the definitions, because I think that you can look at the little highlighted taglines in both of those and find that those all seem like good things, but then when you get more into how those are defined, they may not carry the same definitions that you would be using to understand them when you read them.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on our first episode of Just the Facts, Trump versus Biden, with your host and educator, Jason Cobb. So be sure and tune in next for our show, The Morning Drive. If it's in the evening right now and you're watching this, it's a rerun. So, but you can tune in Mondays through Fridays from 8 to 9 for The Morning Drive, followed by others throughout the week. So, bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.